It's time to stop and listen. 'Cause there's a lot that you've been missing. Whoa, it's time to stop and listen to yourself.
Good morning and welcome to the show. This is Suzi Marsh from Behavioral Solutions with Choosing Life, Addictions, Mental Health, and Recovery, the show dedicated to your emotional, mental, and spiritual healing and rejuvenation. This show is a public affairs presentation from B98.5 FM. Hey, listen to the title of this book. This is why I had to have this guy on my show, The Parent Killer. Now, now I know that, I'm a little bit of a twisted mind. That might partly be from the trauma in my past, but it's also partly because of all the drugs I did in the 70s. Now, because of all those drugs, I probably do think a little bit off the wall. But when I first became a therapist about 20 years ago, and within a year or two of working with teenagers, I started to see and work with trauma survivors, teenagers, and then later on adults who had been sexually, physically, or emotionally or psychologically abused. And I had this very strange fantasy, and I could not get rid of it, couldn't let go of it until I got therapy myself. And the fantasy was that I would find out the names and addresses of all the predators, many times that was parents and step-parents of these patients and clients of mine, and I would have a secret hidden list, and me and some of the clients and some other people who wanted to do this would get some money together and get a hitman and have them slaughtered. Because, I was only 24, 25, what can I say? I was really young. But I couldn't stand dealing with all this atrocity, knowing that so many of these people just lived and lived for free forever, rarely getting caught. And if you do the research, and we'll be doing a show in a few weeks about research on predators and pedophiles and rapists, very, very few of them get caught. So really it was my own unresolved anger and stuff that I needed to work through and distance that I needed to get with my clients. But that was a fantasy that I had for a long time, and only occasionally does it come back. And that's kind of why I liked the name of this book, The Parent Killer. Ashley Blake was born in Spring Hill, Louisiana in 1974. Do you believe how young he is? He developed a passion for writing in his preteen years, and this book is, Ashley, your first published, right?
Yes, it is, Susie.
Can you believe it? His first published book. It is a gorgeous cover with this really sweaty-looking guy, and who turns out to be actually the good guy in here.
Hero and the Vigilante, yes.
Hero and Vigilante. I used to really and truly fantasize that it would be me doing these killings. They needed somebody to stand up for me, But anyway, this guy's the vigilante, but he looks so serious. It's an excellent cover. The Parent Killer is a wonderful novel by this really good-looking guy, about children surviving abuse, and one guy who survived it who becomes a vigilante. It's excellent. So, Ashley, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Susie. Good to be here.
Well, now tell me how it is that you're so young and you have this published book already.
Well, 17 years of writing and 10 years of trying to sell. Publishing company, Ray Publishing in Jackson, Mississippi. They signed me out of the Nashville office, actually. So they took a chance on me. And this is actually my 6th manuscript, first published novel. So it's taken a long time. I am 28, but I've been writing since I was like 10.
Well, it says here in this information I have that at 14 you completed your first novel, Night Prowlers.
Yes, that was at 14, but that was basically a pencil on notebook paper at 200 pages. So I thought it was a novel at 14.
How'd you get into writing at such a young age?
My mother's a teacher, has been for about 30 years now, and she lives in Nashville. She's an administrator for a school up there at this point. But she taught me how to read and write at an early age. So I got into it. I grew up with friends from, they were right out of The Outsiders, from wrong side of the tracks, that kind of thing. I always got in trouble, and I think I looked for it, or it was at my coat heels for the most of my life. So I wrote about what we did, and I'd create tall tales of what we did. If we skipped school, well, that was great. By the end of the day, we're just suspended. and we go home, and that was it. Well, I went home, and we skipped school, then we stole a four-wheeler, and then we ran away, and all this stuff. So I kind of like to open up the good and the bad of small towns, and the things that affect people and relationships.
So how did your parents turn you around so that you didn't go from being just a wild kid to a bum to a wild child and a writer?
Well, both my parents.
Did they make you go to rehab?
Well, they actually took me to a psychologist when I was 12, and the psychologist said, "Look, he's just a 12-year-old boy. That's it," because I'm their first, and they didn't know how. They were like, "What's wrong with him?
Right.
He's a boy, and he lives in Louisiana, and he's hanging out with all these crazy guys, and that kind of thing." And of course, next thing you know, at 17, 18, I'm hanging out with crazy girls, and it just went that way. My mom never had any limitations on what I thought of or put down on paper. The first story I wrote was called The Dollar. It was only like 12 pages, written in pencil. I took it to her, and I was real kind of
How old were
hesitant
you?
about it. I was 10, probably 11, or somewhere in that age range. And she read it, and I was biting my nails, just hoping that she liked it. And she just looked at me and she said, "Go back to your room. I want you to write another one. This is great." So I did. So she never really said, "Oh, well, she'll read now, like my manuscript." She's like an assistant editor, so she sit back and read it. "I can't believe you just wrote this, Ashley. Oh my God." Well, okay, it fits though. So she's really cool about it. And my dad was always supportive. I thank him for the college education that I got, at least 4.5 years of a college education and 2 summer school sessions and all the fun
Me
that I
too.
had. It was great.
Me too. I remember when I got out of college, it was 6 years
6, yes.
to get my 4-year degree. And I said something to my dad, and I said, "I don't know, I think I need a vacation." And my dad said, "You just had a 6-year vacation," where I did a lot of drugs and party. But anyway, well, so you're lucky. And are your parents still together?
They divorced when I was 12. My dad lives in Louisiana, northwest part. I grew up in a town called Spring Hill, sawmill town. And basically, my mom lives in Nashville, and so does more of my family. Most of my sister, a few cousins. So I hang my hat in Nashville, Tennessee now. Been there for about 3 years. So.
Well, tell us, I forgot to ask if you would do any reading from the book, but tell us some
Sure.
of the story.
Okay. The Parent Killer is set in a fictional town of Sutter Springs, Louisiana in the summer of 1997. And there are 3 abused children in the novel. They're all young, 2 10-year-olds and 11-year-old. And what they do is they write their experiences of what happens to them at home. They write it down in a notebook. And the day they leave, the day they run away from home, is the day that the notebook goes missing. A thunderstorm comes through. Nobody steals it, actually. And the parallel to the story is a man named Mason Xavier, who at 13, under extreme duress, murdered his parents, but got away with it. And there is one other person who knows about it, but this person isn't talking. So in the story, at 24 years old, he's a multimillionaire. He's got a beautiful girlfriend. He's about to get married. And the only thing that's really bothering him is the nightmares that he had, or he's having, of what he had done at a young age. He comes across the notebook, and it triggers the rage that he had felt at such a young age inside him. So I'll just read just a few words here.
Well, I really liked the fact that I didn't read the whole thing, and when I stopped reading last night at about 1 o'clock, he was just having all those nightmares, and it was really exciting. I was going, "Oh man, I can't stay awake anymore." But what I like you saying right now is that he I mean, this is terrible. Y'all don't be doing this, but is that he continues his vigilante work.
Exactly. I'll just read the prologue here, and there's a Bible verse here that actually sets the tone of the book. It reads, "For the thing which I greatly feared has come upon me, and that which I was afraid of has come unto me. I was not in safety, neither had I rest, neither was I quiet, yet trouble came." Book of Job 3:25. Prologue is, "I saw her last night in the moonlight haze. Her skin was ripped away from bone, the muscles deteriorated to hair-like fragments, the dents sunken in her forehead, purple, black, and slick. A long gash that ran the length of her cheek melted into and over her eye, like a dried red worm in summer heat. Her face was pale and bluish, her lips cracked and peeled from lying in a coffin. She looked at me, through me, and I knew that I had done wrong. She smelled of death, and I felt cold and empty. For the first time in my life, I felt wrong. Should I have allowed her to live, to see another day? I saw my dad there, too. His neck was lacerated so severely, his head was leaning onto his right arm, one ear touching the side of his throat. When the car went off the road, he flew through the windshield and slammed face first into a cypress tree. In the dream, his body crumpled to the ground like a bag of ice, and I wondered if that was how it really happened. The coroner said the impact was so hard it forced the hinge of his jawbone through his brain into the back of his skull.
Cool.
Thanks.
Now, that's our hero's dream of his parents, right?
Yes.
And did you do some research to understand sort of what's going on with these people?
With the hero and
the kids?
everybody, yes, I did on the internet. I don't like going to the library; it's too quiet. And when I write, I have my music blaring. So when I'm doing my
Honey,
research,
you're ADD.
I know. I think I'm ADHHHD. So I really enjoy just doing my own research. I don't enjoy the research, but I know that I have to do it to at least get it right. But I depend mostly on my imagination when I create. I just use research to tag things.
So you looked into things like
Child abuse cases. Basically, what inspired me was the death of a little girl named Heather White in Minden, Louisiana. And she actually lost her life as a result of parental abuse a week before her 7th birthday.
Now, how'd you hear about this on the news or what?
Actually, I was in a dentist's office and read the header, 6-year-old beaten to death. And I just canceled my dentist office appointment, and I went home, and I was just reading it. I read it at home. I just couldn't read it, until I got home. So I sat back and I read it, and I read the article twice, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. I was like, this is crazy. This happened 25 miles away from my home. And 6-year-old beaten to death. You don't hear that, not in a small town. I've had my own troubles. I've gotten fights, and even the worst fist fight or the worst trouble I've ever been in never even matched what I read about what happened to this little girl who never did anything to anybody. And basically, that case is solved, by the way. I mean, it's the boyfriend is serving his sentence on death row right now in Angola, Louisiana.
Yes.
And the mother who neglected to basically... She's spending life in Angola also. That's a different case, of course, but it just triggered inside of me to go ahead and look at comparable child abuse cases. I mean, growing up in an average income family, just a humdrum small town life, I wrote to escape boredom and the life of a small town. And when I learned about this, it just opened up all kind of doors. I'm like, wow, what if I created a world where children were being abused, and someone found out about it and put a permanent stop to it, and just brought reality to the page, and I don't know, maybe give somebody who was abused as a child some kind of hope even in their adult life, saying, hey, this is what I was thinking of. All right, that's great. It's not a how-to book. It's a fiction novel, and basically it's a good story. It's very entertaining.
Well, and it's a great thing to do to resolve our own feelings, is to write outcomes like that, because just reading about it made me, want to write and imagine many different outcomes for many of the people I work with, and especially, those worst cases. And it's not good to, go kill people.
No,
but
not a good idea at
to
all.
Fantasize it and get it out.
Mason Xavier has his own problems. He's a fictional character, and he just does what he thinks is the right thing to do in his hometown as a child abuse victim. And he risks everything, the millions, the love, everything, to go after the kid's parents in this novel.
What type of... I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Mine derails all the time.
So I'm also ADHD, but I'm on meds, and you act better than me, and you're not. But with cases like this, did you do any studying of the psychological damage that happens to kids and what they carry into adulthood and how they sort of experience their world after abuse like that?
Well, as far as the children are concerned, I noticed that a lot of them were secretive and hidden. The cases, they didn't want to tell the cops. They didn't want to go for help. They didn't want to call. They thought that mommy or daddy or guardian or whoever would find out. And that's just not good, because then it would become a worse scenario for the life they already lived. So I use that in the novel. I make the kids not tell anybody, what the cops going to do. Well, don't tell the cops, let's just run away. That's their plan. Their cute little thinking process. We get on our bikes, we put our bags on, We'll go to the school for the summer. Nobody will be there. Watch TV in the teacher's lounge. Eat in the cafeteria. Nobody will be there to hurt us. So I think that's something I took out of research and implanted into my story. As far as like not telling anybody, doing it on your own, and deciding for themselves their own fate.
And it's so true. And, you know, we haven't mentioned it, but on the other hand are the children who become very loyal to the abusers in order to sort of survive, or also just because it might be their parents, and sometimes they're able to let go of that loyalty because of the abuse, but some kids don't. Their loyalty.
Most kids don't. Actually, I say bringing reality to the page. I'm also talking about the abuse. I'm talking about the romance. I'm talking about just the scenery and dialect and dialogue as far as the whole story is concerned. As far as problems that would exist in a later life, as far as the kids becoming adults and still remembering, I'm only at 2 10-year-olds and 11-year-old right now, and I haven't gotten that far, but there's a part 2.
There's going to be maybe one day another book.
Maybe there might be.
Because that's what I see mainly in
I'm
my office.
hoping.
Is adults who've suffered trauma.
Exactly. Well, these kids have to grow up one day, you know.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. There's some brand new bills coming down the pipe that have stiffer consequences for perpetrators, predators, and even some bills coming down the pike that haven't been signed yet that have to do with psychological abuse.
Well, good.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. I think that should have been into place 20, 30 years ago, just like this book should have written 20, 30 years ago. It should have been written long ago, I think. I read Dave Pelzer's A Child Called It as I was doing research. So that even brought me to another level of understanding of what children go through. And this man was horribly abused by his mother. And I was like, man, I cried over his story. I was like, man, this is not right, you know. And he survived it, and he wrote about his experiences. I don't think I could have done that. I was never abused in the way these kids are abused. And if I was, I doubt I could have picked this out of the air and used the subject matter to create this novel.
Who are some of your other authors that you've read that you've enjoyed?
S.E. Hinton is one of my favorites. The Outsiders is one of my all-time favorite books. Also Carrie by Stephen King, great book. James Lee Burke. I read everything except Jolie Blonde's Bounce. James Lee Burke is from Louisiana, but
did he write that book about Spider?
I believe that's James Patterson.
Oh, you're right.
A lot of people are comparing me to James Patterson as far as the writing. My aunt, before she committed suicide about 3 years ago.
I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right. Thank you. It was horrible, but she always compared me to James Patterson. You write just like James Patterson. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, you just have the style like him. Very easy, smooth flow, easy to read, interesting. I was like, oh, well, thank you very much. So, and that was like almost weekly after she might have read a short story. I say weekly. I don't write short stories that fast. I'd say probably every other summer.
Well, I think I've read 1 or 2 books by Patterson, but I really liked him. Really liked what he did. But I've seen Burke, but I've never read James Burke.
Samaritan Rose, Lost Get Back Boogie. Let's see, Black Cherry Blues is a great one. Jolie Blonde's Bounce is his newest one. I feel like I'm on the media staff for James Lee Burke. But I love his style. He brings a flavor of the South that no other writer can do. I mean, it's uncanny.
What did you think of A Time to Kill by?
Time to Kill by Grisham is actually it's the first book I read by Grisham.
You remind me of him a little bit.
Oh, thank you. That's a compliment because I believe he's a master at what he does.
And what I love is how he does such a wonderful job with getting the Southern flavor in.
Exactly.
It's just so sweet. Do you have any last excerpts to read for us for the last few minutes?
Actually, I wanted to tell people about Dear Ariel, my second novel. It's basically Dear Ariel with a comma, as if you're writing your mother, right? And it's about a middle-aged woman who loses her son in a drowning accident, blames the girl who was with the son for the accident. So the mother perceives this as a murder because the girl sat in the boat and watched the kid drown. Didn't help. And anyway, the mother, who has a broken heart now, basically writes a witch in Moss Hill, Louisiana. The witch's name is Ariel Bordeaux, and she asks her old friend to come to town and put a spell on the girl. So Ariel obliges, and she goes to a small town in Louisiana. Curry is the name of it, and helps her old friend out. And it's twice as long as The Parent Killer. I'm very excited about it, and it should be out next year. Also, you can get The Parent Killer at theparentkiller.com. It's on bookshelves now. You can go to amazon.com, barnesnoble.com, and it's out there, and I just hope that it's being well received and people enjoy it.
And the publisher is Ray?
Yes, R.A. Publishing. It's kind of, it's a little deceiving if you say it over the air. It's spelt R.A. Publishing. And they are out of Jackson, Nashville. I signed with the one in Nashville, actually, a year and a half ago. 5-book contract. And they have also offices in New York, if anybody from New York is around here.
So, do we have just a 2-minute reading that you could do?
Sure,
I don't
not
know
a
if that's
problem.
too short.
Oh, no. Actually, I'd like to read one of the entries from the kids.
Wonderful.
They're written from the point of view from a child, so I had to basically go back into my own past and think of how it was when I was a kid and how I talked and all that good stuff. And the neat thing about the printed page is that I can actually put in misspelled words on purpose. So here's, I'll just start it out with Mason reading through. He flipped through the pages and found that everyone had been dated. Some were filled with paragraphs, some were only 2 or 3 lines. He read one paragraph, his lips moving silently. Yesterday Mama ran after me with an iron. She pushed the end of it on my back. I was naked and I was taking a shower. She got mad at me because I told her she drinks too much. Mama doesn't like me to say that. She says I got a smart mouth. That's what she calls it. I went to my room and put some cream on the burn. I didn't want to go to the hospital. Mama wouldn't take me to the hospital anyway because she said the doctor would ask questions and that was bad. I slept with the light on all night and locked my room. She can't get in when it's like that, and I feel a whole lot better. Sadie. And here's the introduction to one of the parents on Chapter 7. Bobby Champ Rampart was one of the boys. He hunted deer with high-powered rifles, drank liquor straight from the bottle, and smoked weed from a one-hitter that had a skull carved into the wood. He lived in a cramped brick house in the country near the Arkansas line, and the front yard was overgrown and disheveled. The open garage where he worked as a mechanic stayed full of other folks' cars or trucks, tools scattered everywhere, oil stains the size of welcome mats colored into the concrete. 2 years ago he had planned to divorce his wife. She was flighty, disconnected from the real world at times, a spendthrift hooked on over-the-counter drugs who cheated on him with every man from here to the Texas border. Fate, or bad luck as it was, beat him to it.
Thank you so much. That's an excellent reading from The Parent Killer by Ashley Blake. Again, the name of the book is The Parent Killer by Ashley Blake. If you've ever been like me and sort of fantasized getting rid of many of these predators, rapists, and pedophiles, then you will thoroughly enjoy The Parent Killer, and I really liked Ashley's style of writing. So thanks again so much for coming on, Ashley.
Thanks for having me.